Seltzer Kings.
Podcasts.
So, you just started using LinkedIn Premium. Now what? Well, on your premium company page, you noticed around 7.5 times more page engagement and 5 times more page views. Well done. And now, new clients are messaging you. All because you're using LinkedIn Premium, which helps you get the business growth you want. Think big, small business. Think big. Start your free trial at linkedin.com/premium small business. That's linkedin.com/premium small business.
This episode is brought to you by Pluto TV. Summer of cinema is here, and Pluto TV is exploding with thousands of free movies. Feel the explosive action all summer long with movies like Gladiator, Beverly Hills Cop, Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, Good Burger, Stealth, Four Brothers, and Star Trek. Bring the action with you and stream for free on all your favorite devices. Pluto TV. Stream now. Pay never. Stream now at Pluto.tv.
The only reason I'm not angry with you is because Iron Maiden and Judas Priest are from the UK too. Ass.
The following podcast contains...
The use of language has altered since our arrival. It is currently laced with, shall I say, more colorful metaphors. Double dumbass on you, and so forth.
You mean the profanity?
Yes.
That's simply the way they talk here. Nobody pays any attention to you unless you swear every other word.
Explicit language.
Hello and welcome to the podcast that asks a simple question. When the defining music of your generation was just sad junkies singing about being sad junkies, what the hell were you thinking? I'm your host, Dave Bledsoe. This is episode number 497, the Come As You Are edition of the show, where we talk about the music that defined generation, which for some reason we call grunge. Stay tuned. What the Hell Are You Thinking podcast is brought to you by Frank's Secondhand Flannel, because no one wants an unfaded flannel. Are you looking for some new flannel work shirts and in despair because of the thickness and vibrant colors of the fabrics? Tired of bright colors and shirts without holes worn in them? Then come on over to Frank's Secondhand Flannel. All of our clothing was worn by hardworking lumberjacks, fishermen, farmhands, and sanitation engineers, as they did the real work you would never do, but kind of want to look like you did. We go through their Goodwill donations, pick out the nastiest looking smelly flannel shirts available, mark them up 300%, and then sell them to you. Why should you suffer with a new flannel when you can pay for authenticity and style with a Frank's Secondhand Flannel?
Grunge is not for everyone. Truth be told, it is not really understood by everyone.
Grunge? No. What are they?
What does it stand for?
Are you looking at it?
Back on the Seattle music scene with the Melvins, the generally acknowledged grandfathers of grunge, no one is more amazed at how far grunge has come.
Before this music thing started, Terry described it as stuff I tried to clean up my bathtub.
But no more, grunge is hot, really. And what's really amazing, somehow this one didn't start in California.
For all I talk about the 70s and 80s so much, it was the 90s that was the decade of my young adulthood.
Your Grampy stories are hilarious.
So why don't I talk about that decade more? Well, I gotta be honest with you. I was really fucking busy for most of that decade.
Busy. Drinking.
I mean, yes, but also I was busy, like, doing shit, going places, working. While other members of my generation were experiencing their 20s doing things like attending college, smoking clove cigarettes, and pretending to hate capitalism, I was in the military doing military shit.
Drinking and whoring around.
Again, yes, but also working. I went to foreign lands where, I mostly drank and whored. But while I was there, I wasn't tapped into the zeitgeist at home, so I missed a lot of stuff. For example, it wasn't until a few years ago that I learned who actually killed Laura Palmer.
No spoilers!
I didn't even know OJ killed anyone until the Bronco chase, which was big enough news to penetrate even the distant fucking jungle where I was at the time. And as far as things like movies, fashion, music, well, I've never really been into those things, period. But when I was out of pocket, it was a lot worse. Also, as a side effect of being out of pocket, I went through a rather regrettable period of being big into country music.
You're a redneck.
No, I mean, yes, but you see, I'd spent a lot of time shedding their reputation because kids laughed at me, and prior to my boot scooting period, I was a heavy metal kid. But when you're overseas in the military, country music ties you to what is considered culturally America. Also, 90s country music was just big in general, not just to the redneck portion of the country. Garth Brooks did not make $1 billion because shit kickers and military kids bought his records.
I got some old underwear I'm going to throw on stage at the Garth Brooks concert.
And because of this, my memories of the 90s are just a little bit hazier.
That's because you got drunk and blacked out.
Look, I'm sure it's just pure coincidence that I turned legal drinking age in the 90s, okay? So, you know what? This show just tends to fixate on the earlier decades. It has nothing to do with any ill feelings I have towards the 90s or any of the pop culture from said decade. Except, well, there is this one thing, and I feel like this is going to be controversial when I say it, so I want to prepare everyone before I do. You see, I thought back in the 90s, like I do now, that grunge music kind of fucking sucked.
Persecute, kill the heretic!
Which brings me to this week's topic. The rise of grunge music and grunge culture, and how it's supposed to define what it meant to be Generation X. It wasn't. It was mostly just about flannel and sadness. But first, we gotta talk about Seattle.
I prefer not to.
Tough shit. I think most of us have one endearing image that comes to mind when we think about the city of Seattle.
Hey baby, I hear the blues are calling, tossed salads and scrambled eggs. Quite stylish.
But that's not the reality of Seattle, a land where humans settled at the end of the last glacial period as long as 10,000 years ago. The current incarnation of the city came when George Vancouver visited the area looking for a place to name after himself.
That's not how that works.
The first full-time white settlers arrived looking to steal native land in 1851 when the Denny Party arrived and introduced the indigenous people to the Grand Slam breakfast.
This month, Denny's Grand Slam breakfast is once again only $1.99. 2 large eggs cooked in real butter. 2 sausage links, plump and juicy. 2 strips of bacon, crisp and sizzling. And 2 buttermilk pancakes, hot and fluffy, served with hot syrup and whipped butter. It's Denny's Grand Slam breakfast, but the special price only lasts through September 30th. Denny's. You'll like our prices and you'll love our food.
The name for the city of Seattle took its name from Chief Seattle of the Duwamish people. He just really loved moons over my hammy, so he helped out the white folks to set up a city there. And the main industry of this town was logging, shipping timber down to California and to the railroads. The next industry after that was prostitution, booze, and gambling. Indeed, Seattle has a long and storied tradition of being a,
You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
From Wikipedia, quote, Seattle in this area was a freebooting and often relatively lawless town. Although it boasted newspapers and telephones, lynch laws often prevailed, and there were at least 4 deaths by lynching in 1882. Schools barely operated, and indoor plumbing was a rare novelty. In the low mudflats where much of the city was built, the sewage was almost likely to come in on the tide as it was to go out on the tide, unquote. In 1889, the city burned down, fell over, and sank into the swamp, and was quickly rebuilt just in time for the Klondike Gold Rush of 1896. The city experienced a boom, equipping prospectors heading north, and then by World War I, Seattle was still booming as the trade for the United States left West Coast ports amidst all the U-boat sinking ships in the Atlantic.
Crazy war, huh?
But it was World War II that made Seattle's modern economy when Boeing Aircraft began manufacturing B-17s and B-29s at their plant in the city. After the war, Boeing continued as the largest employer in Seattle and drove the local economy until 1970, when Boeing began to lose steam to slowing military contracts and international competition. After a hard decade, Seattle turned another corner as the technology sector began to rise, with numerous tech firms headquartering there, including, of course, Microsoft and then later on, Amazon. So, you got this kind of odd bird of a city. Mix of working class and deep-pocketed corporations in a city with a history of being kind of laid back towards the funner things in life.
By night it was booze, whores.
Meaning you had a university in that town from the deep-pocketed people. And if you have a university, you've got bored middle-class kids to create a counterculture. More from Wikipedia. Quote, starting in the late 1950s, Seattle was one of the centers of emergence of American counterculture and the culture of protest. Before grunge, there were beats, fringies, a local Seattle term, hippies, and bat cavers, unquote. Bat cavers? You want to know what a bat caver is? It's a goth.
Oh, no.
So the city has always been a little weird, a little alt, and a good place for young people who don't exactly fit back home. And by the late 1980s, as tech money was starting to flow in, more and more young people arrived chasing the new thing and the new money, and they funded the weirdos who were creating the local scene. And so it only became natural that Seattle would develop its own musical style. The origin of any city's music scene is far beyond the abilities of this humble pod host. I mean, you're talking about a man who unironically loves Phil Collins. So the idea of my explaining to you how the various cultural movements such as the Boeing bust and the rise of the tech bros intersecting with the historical counterculture of the Pacific Northwest, the end of the 60s, the reaction to Reaganism, all gelled into the distinctive sonic signature that was properly called the Seattle Sound and popularly called grunge. Many bands and many musicians all influenced one another, drawing from musical influences spanning from ubiquitous to esoteric.
That was a lot of words.
So in the interest of brevity, I'm going to start our journey with a college zine created by an Evergreen University student by the name of Bruce Pavitt.
And that is?
I'm not going to spend any time explaining zines for the youngs. They were blogs on paper, okay? The focuses of Bruce's analog blog was American indie record labels, and he named the blog Subterranean Pop. After a few years, Bruce began dabbling in distributing mixtapes.
Which is?
Oh, goddammit, it's a Spotify playlist recorded on an analog medium. And as those mixtapes grew more popular, Bruce shortened the name to Sub Pop, probably because it was easier to fit on the label of cassette, and in 1986, Sub Pop released its first LP, a compilation of Seattle bands like Sonic Youth, Naked Ray Gun, Wipers, and Scratch Acid. It did well enough for Green River, another local band, to want Sub Pop to produce their label's new EP in 1986. In 1987, Sub Pop would obtain funding to release Soundgarden's first album and establish itself as the indie music label for the Pacific Northwest. In the days before YouTube and TikTok, finding your next great musician, indie labels played a vital role in the music industry.
Cocaine?
Yep.
But also they were key in finding new talent. The major labels employed what were called A&R men.
That's sexist. You're sexist.
I'm not sexist, but they definitely were, and they were definitely all men. A&R stood for artist and repertoire, and the major part of their role was finding new talent for their parent companies to sign. This meant going out to lots of bars, clubs, casinos, concerts, and festivals where up-and-coming new bands were performing, and it was a sweet fucking gig. An A&R man could reasonably expect fat bribes, monetary, drugatory, and sexetary from band managers trying to get them to take a listen to their groups in hope of getting a record deal. This meant that a lot of bands that were landing coveted record deals, well, they weren't good. They kind of,
You guys sucked ass.
And this led to the labels moving away from the Blondes and Blow A&R man to the corporate suit A&R man. I mean, they were still taking bribes, doing blow and groupies, but they also had an eye for the bottom line. And one thing that indicated a given band could sell records is how many records they had already sold. And this is where the indies came in. They did all the work of scouting new talent, getting them into the studio, cutting their first albums, and releasing them to smaller markets. If the records did well, the A&R men would come to the indie labels, and deals would be made, contracts would be signed that screwed over the band but did really well for the indie and the major label.
It's basic capitalism.
In Seattle, Sub Pop was doing good business with local bands, and it did not take long for a major label A&R men to come calling to see why so many records were being sold in what was an odd market. It was the British press that first picked up on what was happening with the label. American press focused on New York and Los Angeles, and what the Brits were hearing in Seattle was different from the kind of music than glam and hair metal that was dominating the rock chart in the late 1980s. Sub Pop's brand of music was a catalog of bands which was basically a creole of folk, rock, psychedelic rock, garage rock, pop hooks, and all grafted onto punk and metal riffs and vocals. And because the music was just made up of everything, it got the name grunge.
Yes. It's not a very good name, is it?
As the 80s slipped into the 90s, American music was in an interesting place. For most of the 80s, pop music was dominating the charts. Michael Jackson alone sold enough records to finance a medium-sized Central European nation. Tossed in Madonna and Whitney Houston, and pop music was rivaling the GDP of, say, Italy.
It's anti-Italian discrimination.
But hip-hop was beginning to break through into white kids' awareness, and a new form of rap began to break out from New York into L.A. into the mainstream.
Like gangsta.
And starting in the mid-1980s, the rock charts were increasingly dominated by heavy metal.
Heavy metal, partner, heavy metal. Macho rock and roll.
Bands like Def Leppard, Kiss, Motley Crue, Bon Jovi, Quiet Riot, Scorpions, Europe, Rap, Twisted Sister, Poison, Doc and Whitesnake, and Cinderella were causing tubby teenage boys to strap on leather wristbands and don band t-shirts where they bang their heads, causing lasting damage to their spines. It was a heady time to be alive, and as much as I love and still love metal, the genre was spent by 1991. Record contracts were going to anyone with good hair, wearing leather pants, no matter how shitty their music was. And pod friends, the music cognoscenti hated fucking hair metal. With some good reasons. It was loud, juvenile, and misogynist, maybe even tacky. But you know what? It was also fun. And the only thing a music snob hates worse than tacky people are people having fun listening to music. So they were actively looking for something to replace it, and they liked what they heard coming out of Seattle. Grunge was like heavy metal if you slowed it down, fuzzed up the guitars even more, and nobody washed their hair.
Now you're just being mean.
But for grunge to truly replace hair metal, there needed to be a face so they could show people and tell them that this is the new thing, and this is the guy who will make it cool. And in 1992, they found their face.
Here's the great lead single, Smells Like Teen Spirit, apparently a reference to a feminine deodorant spray. Here's the story.
Black Sabbath meets the Knack.
Whatever the definition, Nirvana is now the hottest band to have come out of the alternative rock scene, specifically from a small town near Seattle, where Nirvana first came together when singer Kurt Cobain and bassist Chris Novoselic met at a local art school.
Well, the band started in 1987 in a small coastal town in Aberdeen, Washington, and we were just jamming in this shack, and moved out of town, started playing gigs in Seattle, made a tape, Sub Pop heard it, and the rest just keeps snowballing.
Sub Pop, the Seattle-based record label which gave Soundgarden its start, also signed Nirvana and released its debut album Bleach in 1989. Drummer Dave Grohl joined the band a year ago, and the trio has just released its major label debut, Nevermind, a collection of raw, punkish, guitar-driven rock that took only 3 weeks to record. It contains songs about love and confusion and the general apathy of Nirvana's generation.
From the River City Reader, quote, Nirvana was founded by lead singer and guitarist Kurt Cobain and by bassist Chris Novoselic. The band went through a succession of drummers, most notably Chad Channing, before recruiting Dave Grohl in 1990. Nirvana's success was popularized alternative rock, and they were often referenced to the figurehead band of Generation X, with their music maintaining a popular following and continuing to influence modern rock culture. In the late 1980s, Nirvana established itself as part of the Seattle grunge scene, releasing its first album, Bleach, for the independent record label Sub Pop in 1989. They developed a sound that relied on dynamic contrast, often between quiet verses and loud, heavy choruses. And after signing to the major label DGC Records in 1991, Nirvana found unexpected mainstream success with Smells Like Teen Spirit, the first single from their landmark second album, 1991's Nevermind. A cultural phenomenon of the 1990s, Nevermind went on to become the diamond certified by the RIAA and is largely credited for ending the dominance of hair metal in rock, unquote. Folks, Nirvana exploded into the culture, driven in no small part by the heavy rotation on MTV. It's hard to explain just how huge the band was by 1993 when they released their follow-up album In Utero. The massive media coverage, constant touring schedule, and fan frenzy around the band was the 90s equivalent of the Beatles. I mean, sad Beatles with a crippling drug addiction, but still. The rising tide of Nirvana lifted a lot of Seattle band boats and vaulted grunge as a music genre and as a style aesthetic into the American mainstream. Before long, Generation X was lacing up Doc Martens, draping themselves in flannel, and taking on ennui as an affectation, all to a Seattle music soundtrack. Why did grunge become more than just a music genre, but youth culture? Well, it didn't hurt that a major motion picture was set right there in the heart of the Seattle music scene and captured the idealized version of Gen X youth for Hollywood.
Singles. You know, I see other people still.
You don't fool me.
Bridget Fonda.
We made the connection, and when you make the connection, it's like chemistry takes care of itself. I mean, it makes its own decisions, you know?
Campbell Scott.
I was just nowhere near your neighborhood.
Kira Sedgwick.
Did I overreact? Do you know who this is?
Sheila Kelly.
Could you see
put me next to a single guy. I've got a special feeling about you.
Jim True. And Matt Dillon.
Janet, you rock my world.
Singles.
If I make this basket, that's fate telling me to call him. Wait, did no basket mean call him or don't call him? Never mind.
Directed by Cameron Crowe.
Cameron Crowe's Generation Coming of Age movie was full of Seattle musicians, Gen X heartthrobs, and Bridget Fonda just looking so fucking adorable. God damn, I had a crush on Bridget Fonda back then. And so did pretty much everyone else on both sides of the gender aisle and the aisle in the middle. While the movie was not a Star Wars level box office success, it was big enough to introduce American youth in the heartland to the style, music, and mindset of grunge. From the New York Times in 1992. Quote, when did grunge become grunge? How did a five-letter word meaning dirt, filth, trash become synonymous with a music genre, a fashion statement, a pop phenomenon, from a subculture to mass culture? The trend line gets shorter and faster all the time. It was just over a year ago that MTV began barraging its viewers with the sounds of Seattle grunge rock, featuring the angst anthems and grinding guitars of bands like Nirvana and Pearl Jam. By last summer, the glossy magazines began tracking grunge looks, the threadbare flannel shirts, knobby wool sweaters, and cracked leatherette coats of the Pacific Northwest thrift shop aesthetic. Hollywood weighed in with a grunge scene movie singles, and then 2 weeks ago, all in the blink of a flashbulb, the fashion designer Marc Jacobs, who had never been to Seattle, was hailed as the guru of grunge, unquote. True grunge, not the Marc Jacobs version, was not glamorous. From Journal Media, quote, as the music carved out a huge section of the charts, the grunge look was appropriated on fashion runways. When Cobain appeared on MTV wearing a ragged olive green cardigan, he created a style simply by rummaging through his closet. Vedder and Cornell sported army boots, cargo shorts, and flannel shirts, suitable attire for the overcast climate of the Pacific Northwest, but their everyday garb turned into a fashion trend for Gen Xers that was then milked by designers in 1992. The editor of Details magazine, James Truman, called grunge the unfashion, as stepping out in secondhand clothes ran counter to the shellac, flashy aesthetic of the 1980s. For those who preferred the waif-like look of Put on Poverty, but it was MTV's relentless airing of Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden videos that sent Gen Xers flocking to malls and thrift stores in search of grunge-like apparel, unquote. And this from a Villanova University website on grunge, quote, grunge also developed a distinct look unintentionally. The grunge style, which included ripped jeans, flannels, and greasy long hair, was appealing to its fans because it was inexpensive, blue-collar, and grimy. It's no wonder why it attracted so many followers. Original grunge bands and their fans couldn't afford to buy anything else. Grunge was unfashionable and not anti-fashionable because the bands did not intend on making any sort of statement on how they dressed, but simply it was cheaper, unquote. Everything about the aesthetic of grunge and what would be termed slacker culture screamed whatever, never mind, both to the youth and to their parents, who couldn't understand now why all of a sudden their kids were so dirty, disheveled, and most of all, why they were so very, very...
Why are you so sad?
Because there was a really, really dark side to grunge. Despite the thick chords and wailing solos, many of the bands, and Nirvana especially, were just fucking grim. From Tacoma Music History, quote, along with the sound came a lifestyle of a sex of drugs and alcohol. As they sang about depression, being sidelined by society, and rejected by peers, some found the effects of substances could calm their demons and the traumas that lingered. This was not new to music, but within grunge arena it became part of the culture. It helped to define it, unquote. Heroin was rife in the Seattle music scene, and heroin would claim a lot of Seattle musicians. Of the big five of grunge, all but one of their frontmen are dead. Kurt Cobain of Nirvana from drug addiction and suicide. Chris Cornell from Soundgarden, drug addiction, died by suicide. Scott Weiland, Stone Temple Pilots, drug addiction, died by overdose. Lane Staley of Alice in Chains, drug addiction, died in an overdose. Only Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam made it until today. Oddly enough, Pearl Jam was hated by the rest of the grunge scene. Maybe it's ironic that Eddie's the one that survived, but I'm riffing here. Living fast, dying young, and leaving a good-looking corpse in your greenhouse.
No, dude. Dude, no.
Is certainly not unique to grunge music, but grunge took the whole thing just a little bit too far. By 1995, grunge was basically over. From loudersound.com, quote, no other genre could have witnessed so much high-profile tragedy in such a short time scale. Both Cobain and Alice in Chains frontman Lane Staley died alone and in agony, and Soundgarden's Chris Cornell retreated into an introspective drug haze to hide from his photogenic appeal. Pearl Jam's Eddie Vedder also couldn't deal with his elevation to rock stardom, and even some of those touched by Seattle, although geographically removed, suffered. Witness late Shannon Hoon of Blind Melon, who overdosed in 1995. And while overdoses aren't rare in the history of rock and roll, these were somehow different, resulting not from the desire for hedonistic thrill, but from desperation. The lyric writing of such talents could have been cathartic. Instead, they exposed a vulnerability, which was then fatally exploited by others, unquote. Grunge music got commercialized. Bands from around the country picked up the sound of grunge, but left behind the nihilism and despair. Also, by 1995, things were a lot different in America in general. Gone were the last dregs of the Reagan-Bush years, the scandals, the war, the old men in power. We had this hip young president, this new internet thing, and then all of a sudden, things just didn't seem so bad anymore. Gen X was getting jobs, making money, and we were having fun. We didn't need to be so fucking morose. Years later, Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam would say of the grunge years, quote, I was shocked by how many people related to Pearl Jam. It's just so fucking weird. You're right about this shit. You're suddenly the spokesman for a generation. Any generation that would pick Kurt or me as a spokesman must be a pretty fucked up generation, unquote. And Eddie wasn't wrong, because we are a fucked up generation. I mean, my God, we got Gen X influencers bragging about drinking out of a goddamn water hose.
First of all, I'm Gen X, so watch it.
Parental neglect and rubbery tasting water does not give you superpowers. Stop pretending you're special because you drank from a goddamn hose. Sorry, that bothers me. And also, Nirvana, as a band, their music, it was fine. It was good. But it wasn't earth-shattering. The most controversial thing that I can tell you about all of this is that if Kurt Cobain hadn't blown his brains out in his greenhouse, no one would think of Nirvana as that special.
Blasphemer!
Imagine this. The best pasta sauce you have ever tasted sits abandoned on a plate. Wasted sauce. That is a tragedy. If only you had used Barilla al Bronzo pasta. Its bronze-cut texture holds your sauce and scoops up every last drop. The Italians call that scarpetta. Capture sauce the Italian way. Barilla al Bronzo. Click or tap the banner to find out more.
Hey, business owners, we know you know the importance of maximizing every dollar. With the Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business American Express card, you can make your expenses work just as hard as you. From afternoon coffee runs to stocking office supplies and even team dinners, you can earn miles on all your business expenses. Plus, you can earn 110,000 bonus miles for a limited time through July 16th. The Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business Card. If you travel, you know. Minimum spending requirements and terms apply. Offer ends 7/16/25.
That is it for the show this week. So many people think that all of Gen X was flannel-draped kids moping to Nirvana when that was like a 2-year moment of our youth, including people who were alive at the time and damn well know better. Still, I look good in flannel and a pair of Doc Martens, and those Doc Martens, they will last a long time. I mean, I think I got a pair buried in my closet today. I mean, not the good Docs, those are expensive, but the good enough Doc Martens, the short ones. Speaking of good enough, rate and review this show so others can find it. Take a listen, decide, it's good enough, I guess. Kick us $1 for new bootlaces for our docs at patreon.com/whatthehellpodcast. Use the website. Do not use the app. And do all the things Jeremy tells you to do in the closing credits. Otherwise, he'll force us to listen to Smells Like Teen Spirit again. And so for me, Dave, come as you are, Bledsoe, producing always an old enemy, Gavin, and all the fictional teen spirits on the show. We want to say that when Kurt said he don't have a gun, he did. Someone should have checked on that. And we'll see you all next week.
What the Hell Were You Thinking stars Dave Bledsoe and features Gavin St. James and several fictional minions. The show is produced by Kimberly Steele and a part of the Seltzer Kings podcast network. You can find more information on the show on their website, whatthehellpodcast.com, or on Facebook as What the Hell Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I have no ending for this, so I take a small bow.
Oh, well, maybe we should do a little Pepsi challenge.
Seltzer Kings
Podcasts.